NASA's Swift Observatory has just detected something that whispers impossibility. The interstellar Comet 3 I/Atlas, now sliding between the orbits of Mars and Earth, is bleeding water into space. 40 kilograms of it. Every single second. That's the output of a fire hose running at full blast, continuously, day and night for months. But here's what makes physicists lose sleep. The comet is at 2.9 astronomical units from the Sun. At that distance, water should be frozen, silent, locked in crystalline stillness, waiting for heat that will never arrive. Yet the spectroscopic data refuses to lie. Hydroxyl radicals glowing in ultraviolet at 3,085 angstroms. Water vapor escaping from a visitor born around another star, pouring into the void where every law we've written says it cannot. What could this mean? Hear me out. At first glance, the claim seems to violate the fundamental architecture of cometary physics. Objects drifting between the stars carry the chemistry of their birth environments, frozen recipes written in ice and rock by suns we will never see. When they enter stellar systems, they follow predictable patterns carved into textbooks over centuries. Close to a star, solar radiation warms the surface. Ice sublimates, skipping the liquid phase entirely, going directly from solid to gas. Water escapes, carrying dust with it, forming the coma and tail we recognize as a comet's signature. But there are thresholds. Boundaries written not in ink, but in thermodynamics. Inside 2 astronomical units from the Sun, roughly twice the distance between Earth and our star, water becomes active. The heat is sufficient. The molecules break free. Beyond that distance, the temperature drops. The solar flux weakens. Water ice stays locked in place, dormant, waiting. 3 I/Atlas is at $2.90. It's in the frozen zone, the region where comets go silent. And yet, it's leaking water like a wound that refuses to close. The numbers whisper an equation that doesn't balance. 40 kilograms per second. In human terms, that's the weight of an adult man escaping into space every second. In 1 hour, 144,000 kilograms. In 1 day, 3.5 metric tons. In 1 month, over 100 tons. Since NASA's Swift Observatory first captured the faint ultraviolet signature of hydroxyl, the breakdown product of water shattered by sunlight, in late July 2025, hundreds of tons of water have poured from this object into the interstellar medium. And the rate isn't declining. It's steady, constant, as if whatever drives this process has no off switch. As if the reservoir feeding it is vast beyond comprehension, or the mechanism sustaining it operates on principles we haven't yet named. To understand why this discovery rewrites the rules, we need to talk about the visitors that came before. The ones that taught us interstellar objects don't follow scripts. In 2017, the first confirmed interstellar object swept through our solar system on a hyperbolic trajectory that screamed extrasolar origin. We named it Oumuamua, Hawaiian for scout or messenger. From the beginning, it defied expectations. Its shape was bizarre, elongated like a cigar or flat like a pancake, depending on which light curve models you trust. It tumbled through space, rotating every 7.3 hours, reflecting sunlight in pulses that suggested an aspect ratio of at least 10:1. But the most disturbing feature was its silence. No coma, no tail, no outgassing that our instruments could detect. It was dry, bone dry. Yet as it left the solar system, accelerating away from the sun, something pushed it. A non-gravitational force, small but measurable, deflecting its trajectory in ways gravity alone couldn't explain. Astronomers scrambled for natural explanations. Outgassing of pure hydrogen, invisible to our telescopes. Radiation pressure acting on an unusually reflective surface. Nitrogen ice sublimating from a Pluto-like fragment. None of the models fit cleanly. And then Dr. Avi Loeb, the Harvard astrophysicist who would later calculate the hollow nature of 3 I/Atlas based on its perplexing gravitational signature near Mars, proposed something bolder. That Oumuamua might not be natural at all. That its acceleration, its shape, its lack of a coma, all pointed toward a derelict light sail, a fragment of ancient technology drifting through the galaxy. Propelled by starlight millions of years ago and now coasting on momentum and the faint push of our sun's photons, the scientific community recoiled. The idea felt too speculative, too much like science fiction bleeding into peer-reviewed journals. But Loeb didn't retract. He published papers. He wrote books. He argued that dismissing the hypothesis without evidence was as unscientific as accepting it without proof. And the debate, 8 years later, still rages in conference halls and archive preprints. 2 years after Oumuamua, the second interstellar visitor arrived, and this time it looked like a comet. We named it 2I/Borisov after its discoverer, Gennady Borisov, a Crimean amateur astronomer who spotted it in August 2019. Borisov had a coma. It had a tail. It outgassed visibly as it approached the sun's spectroscopic analysis revealed it was rich in carbon monoxide, with a CO₂-to-water ratio much higher than typical solar system comets. Its chemistry was alien, but recognizably comet-like. It was shaped by a different stellar nursery, forged in the disk of a star we will never identify, ejected into the void by gravitational perturbations, and now passing through our neighborhood on its way back to the dark. Borisov taught us that interstellar comets could be natural, icy, familiar in behavior, even if exotic in composition. It was a relief, a return to normalcy after the chaos of Oumuamua. And then, in 2024, 3I/Atlas appeared, the third confirmed interstellar visitor, and the strangest yet. It's not dry like Oumuamua. It's not just carbon monoxide rich like Borisov. It's bleeding water. Lots of water. Water that shouldn't be there. Water that defies the script written by its two predecessors. The pattern we thought we were starting to see, that interstellar objects come in wildly different flavors, just became even more complex. If Oumuamua was a mystery and Borisov was a recognizable outlier, then 3I/Atlas is something else entirely. It's a comet that's rewriting the rules in real time, forcing us to ask whether our definitions of natural and artificial are too narrow. But the water is only the beginning. The James Webb Space Telescope, the most powerful infrared observatory ever built, turned its gaze toward 3I/Atlas in August 2025, and what it found added layers to the mystery. Webb's near-infrared spectrograph captured the chemical composition of the comet's coma in exquisite detail. 3I/Atlas is dominated by carbon dioxide, CO2. The ratio of carbon dioxide to water in its coma is 7.6 to 1. For every molecule of water, there are more than 7 molecules of CO2. That ratio is among the highest ever observed in any comet, period. Solar system comets, both long-period visitors from the Oort cloud and short-period Jupiter family comets, typically show CO2 to water ratios around 1 to 1, maybe 2 to 1 in extreme cases. But 7.6 to 1? That's off the charts. It's a composition so unusual that it demands explanation. Where did this object form? What stellar environment produces comets with chemistry like this? Webb also detected carbon monoxide, water ice grains, dust, and a tentative signature of carbonyl sulfide, a sulfur-bearing molecule rarely seen in comets. The water ice grains are particularly intriguing. They're small, less than 1 micrometer across. Tiny crystals of ice drifting in the coma, likely ejected from the nucleus by the explosive outgassing of CO2 and CO. And here's where the water story takes another turn. Swift detected hydroxyl, the breakdown product of water, when 3I/Atlas was at $2.90. But Webb's infrared observations, taken when the comet was at $3.32, found water ice grains in the coma, but very little water vapor directly from the nucleus. The implication is clear. The water isn't sublimating from the surface of the nucleus, at least not in the quantities Swift detected. Instead, those ice grains, ejected by CO2 outgassing, are drifting away from the nucleus. And as they drift, they're exposed to sunlight. Faint, distant sunlight, but sunlight nonetheless. And that sunlight is heating them, not enough to melt them, but enough to sublimate them. The ice grains are acting like miniature steam vents floating in space, releasing water vapor far from the nucleus. This is called an extended source. It's been observed in a handful of distant solar system comets, but it's rare. And it's never been seen in an interstellar comet before. But even this extended source model doesn't fully explain the rate. 40 kilograms per second. That's violent. That's sustained. That's continuous. The Auburn University team, led by Dr. Dennis Bodwitz, calculated that to produce that much water at $2.90, assuming equilibrium sublimation, at least 19 square kilometers of the comet's surface must be actively venting. That's enormous. We don't know the exact size of 3I/Atlas's nucleus yet. Hubble Space Telescope observations in July 2025 provided the sharpest images to date, allowing astronomers to estimate the nucleus diameter somewhere between 440 meters and 5.6 kilometers across. Let's take the middle of that range, say 3 kilometers. A sphere with a 3-kilometer diameter has a surface area of about 28 square kilometers. If 19 square kilometers of that surface is actively venting water, that's over 67% of the total surface. Even if we account for the extended source model, where ice grains are doing some of the work, the observations still imply that over 20% of the nucleus's surface is directly active. That's extraordinarily high. Most solar system comets show active areas covering 3 to 5% of their surface, even at peak activity near perihelion. 3I/Atlas is quadrupling that, and it's doing it while still far from the sun. Something inside this comet is switched on. Some process, some heat source, some mechanism we don't fully understand. And that brings us to Dr. Avi Loeb's latest calculation, the one that's causing whispers in physics departments and Reddit threads alike. The one that suggests 3I/Atlas may not be solid at all. When 3I/Atlas passed Mars on October 3rd, 2025, at a distance of 29 million kilometers, its gravitational effect on the red planet was practically non-existent. To an astrophysicist, that's like tossing a bowling ball next to a basketball and finding they pull with equal strength. Something is wrong. Either 3I/Atlas is made of a material lighter than anything nature has ever manufactured, less dense than foam, or there is simply less of it than meets the eye. The equations whisper one possibility louder than the rest. It's hollow. Loeb's logic is straightforward. If the object were a uniform block of rock and ice, its mass and rotation would match a predictable relationship. They don't. The spin rate is too slow for the apparent size, or the mass is too small for the observed stability. The only way to reconcile the two is to remove mass from the inside to leave a cavity. The result would be the celestial equivalent of a shell. Nature, of course, builds cavities. Some asteroids are rubble piles held together by gravity alone, riddled with voids. But nothing this large, moving this fast, and forged in another star system has ever shown such extreme hollowness. The possibility that it could be a structure, a shell, perhaps a vessel, cannot be dismissed out of hand. When you combine the hollow hypothesis with the water release at impossible distances, a pattern begins to shimmer. Not a conclusion, not proof, but a question that refuses to go away. What if? While scientists point their telescopes outward, watching what enters our solar system, others have been noticing what lingers near our own thresholds. Objects that seem to appear when we attempt to leave the planet. Chenna Soni, a rocket scientist with degrees in physics and aerospace engineering and years of service on NASA launch systems, recently broke her own silence. She reports that during multiple launches, including heavy lift vehicles bound for the International Space Station, engineers have observed unidentified craft maneuvering near launch windows. These are not vague lights on the horizon seen by the untrained eye. They are phenomena witnessed by propulsion specialists, by telemetry teams, by professionals whose livelihoods depend on precision. According to Sony, these craft appear at critical moments, as if waiting for the ignition sequence, performing movements no known aircraft can emulate. They change direction without inertia. They accelerate without exhaust. They hover against the wind. More than once, she says, launches have seemed to coincide with their arrival, as if the very act of attempting escape draws attention. She refuses to call them aliens. Instead, she speaks of star beings intelligences that may operate on principles where consciousness itself interacts with physical reality. It's an idea that sounds poetic until you open the archives and find, buried in the CIA's own files, evidence that such concepts were once taken very seriously indeed. In 1983, a document known as the Gateway Experience circulated within classified channels, written by Army Lieutenant Colonel Wayne McDonald for the CIA. It examined whether consciousness could operate beyond the boundaries of the physical body. Using research from the Monroe Institute, which developed audio frequencies to synchronize the hemispheres of the brain, the study concluded that human awareness might, under certain conditions, transcend space-time itself. The report suggested that at the deepest quantum levels, the Planck scale, where time and space dissolve into probability, consciousness could access information instantaneously, unbound by distance. Sony claims she stumbled upon this declassified paper in 2021 and that it altered her understanding of the phenomena she and her colleagues had witnessed. If consciousness can influence matter, she reasoned, then perhaps these star beings navigate not through propulsion as we understand it, but through conscious intent, through the manipulation of quantum states themselves. It sounds fantastical. Yet quantum mechanics already teaches us that the observer is not passive. In the double-slit experiment, particles act like waves until someone looks at them. Observation collapses probability into fact. The universe, at its most fundamental level, responds to attention. Even non-human observers, machines, animals, produce the same interference pattern collapse. Reality itself seems to care whether it is being watched. If that principle scales upward, then an advanced intelligence, one that has mastered the relationship between mind and matter, could build craft that move not by burning fuel, but by shaping probability. They would seem to appear and vanish, to change course instantaneously, to defy inertia, not because they ignore physics, but because they have learned to participate in it at a level we're only beginning to glimpse. And so we arrive at an unsettling symmetry. On one side, a hollow interstellar object entering our system, possibly a vessel from the deep past, leaking water at impossible distances. On the other, unidentified craft hovering at the edge of our atmosphere, arriving at the moments when humanity tries to break free of Earth's gravity. One event looking inward, the other outward. A conversation across a cosmic boundary. Perhaps these are not separate mysteries at all, but facets of a single phenomenon that expresses itself differently depending on scale and attention. To dismiss all of this as coincidence is easy, perhaps comforting. Yet history reminds us that every paradigm shift begins with data that made someone uncomfortable. The discovery that Earth moves around the sun, that atoms are mostly empty space, that light is both particle and wave, each began as a violation of common sense. What the water detection in 3I/Atlas suggests is not proof of alien engineering. It's something subtler. The possibility that our definitions of natural and artificial are too narrow. If the laws of physics are universal, then intelligence, wherever it arises, will exploit them in ways we have yet to imagine. A comet leaking water where water shouldn't exist could be a natural phenomenon we simply lack vocabulary for. Or it could be a demonstration, a signal, a way of catching attention without transmitting radio waves. Water is universal. It's recognizable. It's the molecule of life, at least as we understand it. If you wanted to catch the attention of a civilization capable of spectroscopy, leaking water in impossible conditions would do it. Across decades, intelligence agencies have probed the same frontier from another angle, through the Stargate project and its study of remote viewing, the alleged ability of consciousness to perceive distant events. For 20 years, the US government funded experiments where human minds attempted to describe locations sealed from them by miles or walls. The results remain controversial, but the persistence of the funding tells its own story. The boundaries of perception are not where we once thought they were. When you place all these threads on the same map, the water-leaking traveler from another star, the silent craft at our launches, the government's flirtation with non-local consciousness, a pattern begins to shimmer. Not a conspiracy, but a continuity. As a physicist, I am trained to prefer equations over anecdotes, spectra over testimonies. Yet the equations themselves are telling us that consciousness and matter are entangled in ways we barely understand. The observer changes the observed. Space and time may be emergent, not fundamental. At the Planck scale, the universe behaves less like a machine and more like a thought. If that is true, then technology built on such principles would look to us like magic. A ship could pivot without momentum because it's not moving through space as we perceive it. It's rewriting the coordinate system beneath it. It could appear during rocket launches because the act of human intention, the collective focus of thousands of engineers, the ignition of will as much as fuel, creates a spike in coherence that is visible to any intelligence tuned to consciousness itself.
Perhaps that is why they start being arrive when we attempt to launch. They not reacting to rockets, but to the resonance of intent, to the flicker of avarenes powerful enough to breach gravity's leash. And perhaps the same principle explains 3 Atlas. If consciousness and matter are linked, a probe built with that knowledge would not need engines or power in our sense. It could think its way between stars, sustaining itself through feedback between avarenes and quantum fields. Its aloneness, if Loeb is correct, would not be a defect but a design. A chamber for consciousness. A resonant cavity where information and reality intertwine. Its water release at impossible distances would not be a malfunction, but a signal. A way of saying, here. Not what you expect. Look closer. Veter that consciousness still resides within it, or veter we are examining a relic, an empty cathedral drifting through eternity, is a question our instruments cannot yet answer. But even without answers, the implications are profound. We now possess 3 converging lines of evidence. Interstellar anomalies that defy conventional models. Credible witnesses describing a non-craft within our own atmosphere. And the classified research suggesting that consciousness may play an active role in the structure of reality. It alone can be dismissed. Together, they form a mirror too large to ignore. So what does this mean for us, the flagrant civilization that has only just learned to sleep the bonds of its home world? It means we might not be alone in the neighborhood of physics. It means that intelligence could be older, broader, more deeply woven into the fabric of the cosmos than biology itself. And it means that our next great frontier might not be Mars or Alpha Centauri, but the frontier between mind and matter. If Loeb is correct, 3 Atlas is not a comet a message in geometry, a demonstration that space can be crossed not by trust but by understanding. If Sony is correct, the craft near our launches are not intrusions but reminders that evolution is not only a biological process but a cognitive one. That when a species begins to master its own consciousness, it attracts the attention of others who have done so before. Maybe that is why the universe seems so que why the stars do not answer our radio calls. Perhaps advanced civilizations do not speak in electromagnetic noise at all. They communicate through resonance, through consciousness, through the synchronization of minds across the vacuum. If so, then the question is no longer whether we are being watched. It is whether we are ready to understand the language of attention itself. The double slit experiment taught to us that looking changes reality. What happens then when reality begins to look back? 3 Atlas continues its silent journey, indifferent to our speculations. In 16 days, on October 30 th, 2025, it will reach perihelion, its closest approach to the sun. It will pass between Earth and Mars, flare or not, and disappear into the dark again. But it has already succeeded in one extraordinary task. It has forced humanity to confront the possibility that the universe is not a stage on which we act alone, but a network of observers watch one another across light years. And as for those craft that were during our launches, perhaps they are not wardens or invaders, but witnesses. Curious minds observing the moment when a young civilization first learns how to rise. In physics, we often say that measurement is a dialogue between system and observer. The act of measuring is participation. If so, then by watching the skis, we have already entered the conversation. Maybe that is the connection between all these stories. The interstellar visitor approaching from the depths, lacking water where water cannot be. The unknown craft appearing when we reach upward. The human experiment spearing into consciousness itself. They are all aspects of the same cosmic question. What happens when awareness recognizes itself at scale? The answer will not come from dogma or denial. It will come from the next measurement, the next signal, the next act of courage to look again even when the data make us uneasy. Because that, above all, is what defines a scientific civilization. Not certainty, but curiosity strong enough to survive the unknown. Perhaps one day we will confirm that 3Z Atlas was natural after all, a frozen shaped by forces we still struggle to model. Its water release a Kirchhoff extended sublimation we simply needed better instruments to understand. Or perhaps we will learn that it was built long ago by minds that thought in frequencies rather than flash. Its water aggregating, its alone is a design, its journey a test of veter we are ready to see. Either way, it has done its job. It has reminded us that the universe is stranger, deeper, and far more vast than we imagine. And somewhere out there, beyond the orbit of Mars, a visitor from another star turns slowly in the light of our sun. Stiad as a artiat. Lacking water where water should not be. A echo from another intelligence, or the prelude to our own awakening.